Right now, Jen joins me here in Studio Q. She just put her headphones back on. She removed them when that clip was playing.
It's like you're traumatizing me, but you know those like
I've
leaders?
never seen that reaction in the studio.
Have you ever had a stand-up in before?
I have, yeah.
Oh, maybe. You know what it is that material is so old to me now. And even like I wrote the book 3 years ago, but it, takes a while to come out. They have to staple it. So many times they have to staple it. And so all that stuff is not stuff I currently do in my act or I'm going through. So I just cringe and I go, oh God, like it just makes me cringe. And I also just don't like the sound of my voice. But
has it been like that throughout your whole career? Once you're done material, you're like, I can't hear it. I don't want it anymore.
Oh yeah. Or just even, and you have to listen to things sometimes, like as I'm working on a new hour, I have a new special coming up. I have to tape myself and listen to it just to make sure, because I do a lot of improvising on stage. So actually, I can listen to that a lot easier. It's hard to listen to something that is the final product because I might think of something funnier, or I'll just think that's not funny. I can't believe that's out there, or I don't like the way I was using my voice.
I can understand that to some extent. Like I make music, and when I hear a song finished and I like it, I never listen to it again. Because I want to have just that memory of, oh yeah, I liked it. I remember that.
Yeah,
I
liked it at the time. I liked it enough. I think that's exactly it. I just figured it out. Yeah. As you said that's what it is. I liked it enough at the time to do it. Obviously, I wasn't writing a book or recording a special and thinking this is terrible. I thought this is pretty good.
So what's your new material about?
Well, I'm on a tour right now in support of the book, but none of the material is in the book. And so it's like mostly stuff from my childhood that I used to do a lot of just locally in LA. So it's like really weird stories about like ruining a talent show when I was a kid, having to go to anger management as a kid because of an event, being in like a crazy love triangle on 9/11.
Wow.
It sounds like a threesome, but it's not. It's me being in love with someone else and having a relationship on 9/11 and being in New York at the time and having a fear flying and disrupting a fear flying course. So it's all these crazy things I've done in my life. So that's what the tour I'm doing now is.
Okay.
But then the newer material I'm working on is even different than that.
For some reason, I'm inclined to ask you about this anger management.
Yeah.
So what inspired that?
Well, I beat up a boy in my class with a hockey stick. And so
okay.
I would say that inspired the school psychiatrist to...
I was going to say inspired is not exactly the
right
word.
No. Like, why were you inspired to go to... But what happened was I was picked on a lot by boys in 5th grade. It wasn't the mean girls thing. It was like, for some reason, boys. And boys are very physical. And so they used to throw like rocks inside of snowballs at me and things like that. And so one day I just got my revenge on this kid. And it was after a school talent show, and he'd made fun of me for tap dancing. And I thought it was really cool that I tap danced. And so we were in the school gym, and I took a hockey stick, and I kept... first the teacher said, he can make fun of me because boys will be boys. So I took the hockey stick, and I beat his leg. And when they asked me what I was doing, I said, girls will be girls.
Wow.
And then they made me go to the school psychiatrist, which I didn't know what that was. Like suddenly you're in this room with a woman who doesn't have a desk. It's only couches. She wants you to finger paint. She's talking quietly. And I was like, this is kind of cool, but weird. And then when I told my mom, she was like, no way. You're not going back to that.
I love stories like that. I love stories from childhood that you remember when you were a child, you just didn't understand everything that was going on, but then you piece it together later and it's totally hilarious.
Yeah. My mom was like, everyone in the school is going to think you're a weirdo. I'm like, well, they already do, but now I get to have lunch with this really nice lady every day. And she's
skip math class and finger paint, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, I do want to get into this book.
Yeah, of course.
Now, when I was reading it, I was just floored. I was going, I could never do this. This is brave.
What, to write it or to
write it?
Yeah.
Now inspired is the right word. What inspired you to go there, to gather up the strength and the courage to put down these experiences? These are tough experiences. You write about the dissolution of your marriage, your divorce. Yeah.
I don't think it wasn't that tough for me. There's always stuff going on in my personal life that is too much to tell or not the right time. It would seem too much at the time. And there's things I'm working on now that I wouldn't necessarily blurt out in public. But so at that time when I wrote it, my marriage had been broken up for, I think, 3 years at that point. And so I was like, oh, it was to tell the story about me. I think it would be more brave to tell someone else's story and deal with the consequences of them getting angry. Like I try not to mention anything about what my husband was going through, but also I actually don't know. And that was the biggest part, is we never talked about things. And so it really didn't take that much courage, but the inspiration was when I was writing my first book, I was going through all of this and I had to stick to what I was contracted to write, and I couldn't go
deal
off
with any of that stuff.
Yeah, so I was like, oh, I know someday this will be a good thing to write. And I think just getting divorced, not having a very long marriage, and how I felt I was being treated by people or how it made me feel, I thought there's got to be a lot of other people that relate. And all of my material is always from my life, so there really wasn't an option that I was going to write fiction.
Well, we see in this book that it was a pretty amicable divorce, pretty friendly divorce.
Sure, that's what I wrote.
Yeah.
I would say it wasn't until it wasn't. I think I don't.
Sorry,
it was until it wasn't.
Okay.
I didn't really put this in, but once lawyers get involved, it gets so ugly. And we'd promised each other no lawyers, and then he got a lawyer, and then it just got crazy after that. Not fighting or anything, but just the anxiety of what dollar amount is going to be coming in front of me today from some lawyer, and you don't know if the lawyer's making it up or the person that you used to be with, and you're not allowed to talk to them per the lawyers.
Money brings up the worst feelings. Yeah.
It's total anxiety.
Was that the most difficult part?
That really
divorce,
was.
really?
And I know it sounds so shallow, but to not know, is my entire salary this year going to be taken away? How will I have to pay palimony? How long will this go on? This lawyer is costing me money that I didn't even want to get. So it was so stressful, and there's nothing anyone can do for you. I mean, it all worked out. I didn't lose much and everything, but that was the most stressful part, and people did not want to hear about it. Because my husband and I had a secret meeting once behind the lawyers' backs, and we were like, oh my God, we're not trying to gouge this much from each other. And so we tried to make a side deal, which we did, and our lawyers were mad, but we did it. And when I told people, but before that, when I would tell people the stressful part is the lawyers, they would be like, blah, 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 hands over their ears.
Why do you think your friends didn't want to hear that?
Well, we had mutual friends, and they would be like, we don't want to hear anything bad. And I was like, I'm not saying anything bad. He could say the same thing. I'm saying this is stressful. This is why I can't hang out tonight, because I had insomnia all last night and I'm freaking out. It was just like I was trying to tell people what was going on, and a lot of times they just did not want to hear it.
You also point out some of the less obvious adjustments that have to be made after you're divorced. You talk about feeling the need to get a home security system,
right?
For example.
Yeah. Well, now I live in a building that has a doorman, and so that's my security unless he's the one that goes crazy, which I often think about. But I lived in this apartment that was right there, like first floor out on the street, and I was like, oh my God, a murderer could come in. By the way, a murderer could have come in when I was married. Like, I don't think anyone's spouse is trained in that kind of defense. No. So everyone who's married, get an alarm. Anyway, you're not going to get saved by your spouse. And so, I had to set up my own, but I was renting. So there's a whole different, you cannot get a good alarm system that has like the private police. It's basically, I had an alarm that if it went off, the company would call me, ask if I was okay, and then they would call the police, which the police don't come in LA. And also if they call me...
What's a phone call to you going to do? You're right.
Of course I'm going to go, I'm fine, while there's someone with a gun to my head next to me. I'm great. Please do not send the police, wink, wink.
Sometimes I think it's just the loudness will maybe be annoying for the criminal.
That's what I think too, unless you're in a city and nobody cares and you're always hearing alarms and noises. And how many times have you walked by a parking lot where the car alarm's going off and just been like, oh, well, I'm sure it's fine.
Yeah. But I also don't want to go near that car because it's so loud. It's annoying.
Right. Yeah. So we're all screwed.
You also look at some of the subtle ways divorced people are stigmatized in society. I mean, you talked about your friends not wanting to hear about the hardest part of what you're going through. You also write about a visit to the doctor's office.
Oh, yes.
That surprised you. Can you write about what? Tell us what happened there.
This was hard to write about because I had a doctor who told me I had hepatitis C, which is crazy and something you cannot get unless you're sharing needles. It is not an STD per se. And I had had 2 partners at that point since my divorce, and nobody had anything. And I just went in, and it was my yearly physical, and I'd been with this doctor for 10 years. I'd been with her since my husband and I had met. And I just said, I'd love a new STD test you got to get that diploma that says you're okay. And so she asked me why, and I said, I'm divorced, and I'm, obviously not just with him anymore. And she marked up a whole round of tests, but there's this thing with Hep C, you're not supposed to test someone for it because 50% of the people come up false positive unless you do this crazy bigger test that involves like so much blood being drawn. But if you've ever had mono, you can get a false positive on the early testing, which I did. And she just gave me this lecture about this lifestyle you're leading. And I was like, I've had 2 experiences in 6 months. Like, there's no lifestyle. And it was really crazy. And finally, we found out I didn't have it. But I didn't want to write about that because I thought people reading it would not believe me. But and my parents would be like, what? Which they still haven't read it. So, but yeah. And so I had to switch doctors. And when I went to the new one, she was like, do you know how many women come to me who have judgmental doctors about, it's not when you're single, it's post-divorce, getting back out there. And I was like, weird. I don't want to say this because I think it sounds so easy of a diagnosis, but it seems to be maybe she and other people that get like that are just afraid of their own divorce or something.
Is that what you suspect? People are afraid of
protecting
their own marriages? Or?
I didn't see people acting like this in the single coupled world. So if you're in a couple but you're not married, I didn't see anyone being weird around their single friends or if they're going through something. I see it so much with married people and divorced people. It's like maybe they're having problems or they're having fights and they don't want to deal with getting divorced because they don't need to. And then I think it's like the less they know. I don't know.
That's interesting.
I still to this day don't really know what it is. Maybe it's all in my head, but other people have said they feel the same way, but we don't have any proof.
In case folks are just tuning in, I'm Shad, you're listening to Q, and I'm speaking to comedian Jen Kirkman about her new book, I Know What I'm Doing and Other Lies I Tell Myself. That last point you made, it makes me think about the fact that this book, it's about you. It's very personal. It's about your journey. But it seems to me to be making a bigger point about trusting your common sense, your own common sense.
I hope so, yeah. Because at first my editor wanted me to write a real kind of book that had a lot more concrete advice in it. And I was like, I do not know what people should do. I don't even know what I should do. But I mean that in a positive way, like, everything I go through, I just think, well, I don't know how the result is going to be, so I have to do it for the love of it or for the experience of it or just to get through something, just walk one step in front of the other. And so, yeah, I think half the time we have to use our gut. And if we don't, we screw up, it's fine. If something doesn't end in death, then you're fine.
As long as you're doing it for the right reasons, I think.
Yeah, it can be anything from your career to... I get, like, a lot of people ask me for advice, like younger people getting into comedy, and they're like, what should I do? And I think what they're saying is, how do I not fail? I can tell when someone's asking that. And so that kind of advice seeking on any topic, I think the true thing people are really asking is, how do I not fail? And I'm thinking failure is the most important part of anything.
Have you always known that, or has that been tricky for you? You've had to kind of learn to...
I've known it with comedy for some reason, but I never applied it to life. Never until recently, like the past few years, where I was like, oh, it's okay. There's no time wasted because there's no should have been here by this point, should be this by this point. And especially because I have an unconventional job in life, maybe it's easier for me to accept because I have so many examples around me of people at every age coming into their own. But yeah, no, later in life acceptance. In comedy, I started out in Boston and a bunch of older comics sat us down and told us about all the times we're going to bomb and how awful it's going to be. And so I already knew that. And I took a pride in it. Like, I can't wait to bomb. I'm going to be a real
badge of honor.
Yeah, I'm going to be like a real hard dude. So, but with life, I didn't want to bomb at all.
Let's get back into this book for a second. Your dating chapter is cleverly titled Jen Cougar Mellencamp.
Thank you.
And you write in that chapter about how there's no comparable term from the animal kingdom for men,
yes.
older men who date younger. How do you feel about that term, cougar? We heard it in the clip. You didn't hear it because you were plugging your ears.
That's right. I was hiding under the table.
But we heard it in that clip. You know, it's used in that. How do you feel about that term?
It doesn't actually bother me. I will just preface, because I'll get a bunch of tweets from young men. I do not date younger people. It was one night. I had a one-night stand with someone in their 20s. And and I would never do it again. Can barely relate to people 3 years younger than me, let alone 13. But since I am not one, I actually don't mind the term because it seems like women embrace it. So if they're fine with that, I'm fine with that. I just think it's weird in general that men get silver fox, but that sounds kind of cool, like they're going to take you for a ride in their Cadillac. And cougar sounds like a desperate woman at a bar preying on something. But I think women like it. I think they think it's empowering, like, I'm going to go get you. And I don't. I think it's, having been around a young person in that way for one night, I was like, oh, creepy.
What did you hate about it?
Just that he wasn't alive during some of the, like if you're talking about the 90s or something, he was a musician. Like he knew some of the bands I was talking about, but he'd never heard them the way that I did for the first time on the radio, things like that. And it just felt like this isn't ever someone I will connect with. I don't know.
You will never share that.
Yeah, we'll never share certain things. And I know being a cougar sometimes is all about just sex or something. So I think it was just, even I realized for me on that level, there can't be this sense that younger is better and I've snatched something better than my age. I think that's what it is that made me uncomfortable.
There's something problematic about that for you.
Yeah, like he's supposed to be a better catch, but why? I can't talk to him about anything. And yeah, he's cuter, I guess, than your average person that's not, but that's just because he was cute. Like it wasn't because he was in his 20s. So yeah, I think it's just, I think that's what it is that younger equals better. And from what I found, getting older is better than being young. I think young people think people in their 40s sit around wishing they were still in their 20s. And I would just like start running away if someone came up to me and said, I have a magic wand, you can be in your 20s. Go back, yeah, I would keep running.
What do you love about being older?
I just don't care anymore about a lot of things. Like even down to like, I don't know how to say it.
Less self-conscious?
Yeah, less self-conscious, not worried about doing anything right. I've had enough of a life that I can go, I've had a really great life. There's no need to stress about anything. And also just, I speak my mind, but not in that like Donald Trump way. I don't say offensive things, but I just feel confident in who I am and not like, oh, I'm sorry, not apologizing for anything. And I don't know, I just am comfortable with myself.
You don't hold back the truth.
I don't think so. Like and it's really just being able to stand up for myself, or stupid things like that, or not caring what people think, or I don't even know. It's so hard to put into words, but even being able to just feel like a grown-up at a certain age. You're like, all right, I've been, technically you're one probably in your early 20s, but now at 42 almost, I'm like, okay, I think I'm a grown-up now. I think I'm allowed to kind of live how I want to live.
In terms of standing up for yourself, last week you tweeted about an interview that was sent to you by a reporter here in Toronto. You called the interview sexist, disgusting.
Yeah.
Can I ask you what happened?
Yeah. I don't know if I don't think he ever put it up. But I did answer half his questions really nicely and thoughtfully. And, but it was just, you're run of the mill. Like I do a lot of email interviews when I'm back in LA. And, I usually have a publicist that says, stay away from asking about being a woman, because it's just like, it's such a nowhere question. And most of the questions...
I saw your YouTube video about that.
Like, oh, you did?
Like questions not to ask, but continue. Sorry.
Well, he just wrote, he asked me a bunch of things about my old boss, Chelsea Handler, which is like, why? You can, ask me about being on the show, but I haven't worked for her in 2 years. And he was calling her a boozy B word and was just like, I think he was just trying to be funny. But I just don't, in my life anymore, I'm not interested in looking into the psychology of someone who's doing something that I think makes them bad at their job and makes me uncomfortable. Like, great, he was trying to be funny. Didn't work for me. So I just wrote under every answer I didn't like, this is sexist. And he would even write, is this sexist, but you look great lately. Like, let's talk about your looks, or do you not like when journalists ask you about your looks? And it's like, yeah, this is sexist. Not because of my looks, but if a woman wanted to be like, hey, you're in your 40s, like, let's talk about Botox. Do you do it? Do you not? Like, stuff like that maybe, but not just a guy thinking I'm going to run with this as a question I can answer. Like, I'm glad you like how I look. Thanks. No.
How often do you have to deal with questions like that?
All the time. That's why I have to usually have my publicist pre-screen people and say she will not answer this. And then a lot of times what ends up happening is when I get on the phone with them, they'll ask why these things are off limits. And I'll have to say I can't answer, and I've been hung up on. It's crazy.
Wow.
It's not a lot. It's not every time. But it's a lot.
Wow.
Yeah. So then there's some people I get a vibe from, and I'll be like, email interview only. Some people just want to talk on the phone to a girl. I know it sounds crazy, but I've been kept on the phone a long time where I'm like, I have to go. And then they will email me and then just say, like, when you're in town, let's get a drink. And it's like, no,
That's so incredibly unprofessional.
It's so crazy to me. So yeah, it happens a lot.
And your instincts are just even sharper around that now, I'd assume. You can just kind of, as you were saying, you can get a vibe from someone and be like, no, shut this down.
Yeah, shut it down. And I was afraid the promoter at the theater I'm performing at would be mad at me, but I was like, you know what? If she's mad at me, that's okay. That's a price I pay. I didn't trash him. I didn't say his name anywhere. I just wrote back to him, no, this is ridiculous and sexist. And I feel like to be that harsh, I don't even know if that's harsh, but I'm not second guessing it anymore. And if he thinks it is, maybe he'll rethink it next time. I don't think he learned anything, but that's okay.
Again, with age, you're more comfortable with that.
Yeah, exactly. When I'm 50, I'll just, imagine what I'll say. I'll probably be excited when I'm 50, like, why isn't anyone telling me I look good? No, I'm kidding. That's like a thing guys always say. When you're older, you'll regret being so rude to us. It's like, when I'm older, I won't care. I'll care even less.
Guys say that?
Yes, that's like a big thing. When guys compliment you and you don't want the compliment, it's like, yeah, well, when you're older, you'd be begging for them. And that's another thing is like, I don't even care if there's no one around when I'm older. Like, I don't care. I just want to wear fabulous outfits and walk around New York.
I fantasize about getting older too and doing whatever I want all the time.
I thought you were going to say wearing fabulous outfits and walking around New York. I'm like,
no, they won't be that fabulous. Basically what I'm wearing now, yeah. Okay, just to wrap up, we only have a couple more minutes, but towards the end of the book, there's a really poignant chapter about your friendship with the late Joan Rivers.
Yes.
Maybe final question, how did Joan inspire what you do today?
Well, I think a lot of the backstage stuff that she did inspires me, like in the same way, kind of learning how to speak up for what she needs, whether it's an equal pay situation. But I also think she inspired me. I don't think people realize how kind she was and how generous and how much she just loved so much what she did, that even getting to the biggest levels, she always was interested in learning something new. So when podcasts came out, she went on one and for 3 minutes made fun of it and then was like, no, but seriously, what's a podcast? And she got her own. And she was always learning what younger people were doing instead of getting bitter. And that's something that I've learned a lot from her, and just her loving every crowd and do every interview and do everything, like sell every unit. She was a great salesperson. And so I think of her anytime I don't want to get up in the morning. I'm like, Joan would kill to be here. She would literally take my life and come back to life just to get up at 5 a.m. and do an interview. So I think about her every time I don't want to be doing something.
What an amazing inspiration to have in your mind at all times.
And it paid off. It's not like she worked so hard and then didn't get anywhere, but I just love the story. Like, she was absolutely right to be the way she was.
Well, it's so great having you here.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.